Do you ever feel tired after just being around people? Do you sometimes cry for reasons you can't explain? Or feel someone's pain even when they're smiling? You might think it's intuition or a gift, but Carl Jung would ask, is it really empathy, or is it your shadow trying to survive? Because sometimes what we call feeling too much is actually never feeling ourselves at all. And if you keep absorbing everyone else's emotions without boundaries, you'll disappear completely, not into love, into emptiness. Empaths are often praised. You're so kind, so understanding. You always know how I feel. But what they don't see is what it costs you. Sleepless nights, a chest that tightens for no reason, a sadness that was never yours to begin with. Jung said, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. And for many empaths, that unconscious story began in childhood, where reading the emotional weather around you was how you survived the storm. You learned to merge, to anticipate pain, to carry what no child should ever carry. And now, you're still doing it. You walk into a room and immediately scan for tension. Your nervous system becomes a radar for everyone else's distress. You absorb their anxiety, their grief, their rage, and mistake it for your own emotional truth. But here's what nobody tells you about being an empath. It's not always a gift. Sometimes it's a prison built from the belief that your worth depends on how much pain you can carry for others. That love means disappearing into someone else's emotional landscape until you can no longer find your way home to yourself. You've been trained to believe that boundaries are selfish, that saying no makes you cold, that your value comes from how much emotional labor you can provide without ever asking for anything in return. But what if that's not empathy at all? What if that's trauma masquerading as compassion? Today, we're going to explore something that might feel uncomfortable at first. The possibility that what you've been calling empathy might actually be emotional codependency, a survival mechanism you developed as a child that's now slowly destroying your adult life. We're going to journey into the shadow, that place where all your exiled parts are waiting. Your anger, your needs, your right to say no, your permission to feel your own feelings without immediately trying to fix someone else's. This isn't about becoming cold or disconnected. This is about becoming whole. Let's look deeper. Empathy, when rooted in wholeness, is connection. But empathy without boundaries is self-abandonment. Carl Jung described the loss of self as a fragmentation. The persona pleases, the shadow screams. And empaths live in that separation every single day. You perform calm while your body shakes with absorbed anxiety. You say, I'm fine, while your chest carries a room full of tension that was never yours. Because somewhere long ago, you made a decision that changed everything. If I feel everything, maybe I can fix something. If I disappear, maybe they'll stay. If I hold their pain, maybe I'll finally matter. This is not empathy. This is enmeshment. This is trauma disguised as compassion. Think about Emma. She's 32, works in marketing, and everyone calls her the office therapist. During lunch breaks, colleagues seek her out to vent about their relationships, their bosses, their existential crises. Emma listens. She absorbs. She offers gentle advice, never asking for anything in return. But by Friday afternoon, Emma feels like she's drowning. Her chest is tight. Her thoughts are scattered like broken glass. She can't tell where her emotions end and everyone else's begin. Emma thinks she's being kind, but Jung would recognize this pattern immediately. The shadow's desperate attempt to earn love through emotional labor. You see, when Emma was 7 years old, her mother would disappear into depressive episodes that lasted for weeks. The house would go silent except for the sound of muffled crying behind closed doors. Little Emma learned that if she could sense her mother's mood shifts early enough, if she could become perfectly attuned to every micro-expression of sadness, maybe she could prevent the collapse. Maybe she could save them both. Emma would bring her mother tea in her favorite blue mug. She would sit quietly on the edge of the bed, absorbing her mother's pain like a tiny emotional sponge. She would become whatever her mother needed. Cheerful when she needed hope. serious when she needed understanding, invisible when she needed space. And it worked. Sometimes, her mother would smile through her tears and say, "What would I do without you, baby? You're my little angel." But what Emma didn't understand was that she was learning to disappear. Every time she merged with her mother's emotional state, she lost a piece of herself. Her own sadness about her mother's illness got buried. Her own fear about the instability got silenced. Her own need for comfort got ignored. That's the hidden foundation of toxic empathy. The child's magical thinking that emotional merger equals survival. That disappearing into someone else's pain is the price of belonging. But the cost is enormous. Emma learned that her own emotions were inconvenient interruptions to her real job, managing everyone else's feelings. Her anger got buried so deep she couldn't access it even when someone crossed her boundaries. Her sadness got ignored until it became a chronic ache she couldn't name. Her needs got silenced until she forgot what wanting something felt like. Now, at 32, Emma doesn't even know what her own emotional signature feels like anymore. When someone asks her what she wants for dinner, she panics. When someone asks how she's feeling, she automatically scans the room to see how everyone else is doing first. This is what Jung called the provisional life, living as if your real life will begin once you've fixed everyone else's problems. But that day never comes, because there's always another crisis to absorb, another person to save, another emotional emergency that requires your complete self-abandonment. But empaths don't just feel others. They lose themselves in others. And the pain isn't always emotional. It shows up in the body, in chronic fatigue, anxiety attacks, autoimmune flares, mysterious illnesses that doctors can't quite explain. Because the nervous system can't keep carrying what was never meant to be yours. Take a moment right now. Notice what's happening in your chest, in your shoulders, in your throat. Is that tension yours? Or did you pick it up from someone else's energy today? From that phone call with your mother? From your coworker's stress? From the cashier's bad mood? From the news you read this morning? Most empaths can't tell the difference anymore. They've been merging for so long that their own emotional signature has become foreign. This is what Jung called living in the persona, the mask you wear to please others while your authentic self suffocates in shadow. The empath's persona says, "I'm here for everyone. I don't need anything. I'm just happy to help." But the shadow knows better. The shadow is screaming, "What about me? When do I get to feel my own feelings? When do I get to be taken care of? When do I get to matter?" Let me tell you about another client. His name is James, and he's 27 years old. James grew up as the middle child in a chaotic household where his parents fought constantly. His older brother responded by becoming rebellious and aggressive. His younger sister withdrew into books and fantasy. James chose a different survival strategy. He became the family peacekeeper. When his parents started yelling, James would intervene with jokes or distractions. When his brother got in trouble, James would redirect their parents' anger by confessing to something he didn't do. When his sister was crying, James would sit with her for hours, absorbing her fear and sadness until she felt better. James learned that his value came from preventing emotional storms. He became hyper-attuned to the slightest shift in family tension. He could tell by the sound of his father's car door whether it was going to be a good night or a bad one. Now, as an adult, James attracts partners who are emotionally unavailable or in crisis. He falls in love with their potential rather than their reality. He spends months or years trying to heal their childhood wounds, absorbing their trauma as if it were his own. James doesn't realize he's recreating his childhood dynamic. He doesn't see that he's still the little boy trying to prevent the storm by sacrificing himself. Jung would say, this is the shadow's plea. It's not asking you to stop caring. It's begging you to start caring for yourself. The shadow holds all the parts of you that got exiled in service of others. Your anger when someone crosses a boundary. Your needs that feel too big or too much. Your right to say no without justifying yourself. Your permission to feel your own feelings without immediately trying to fix someone else's. When you constantly absorb other people's emotions, you're not being empathetic. You're being self-destructive. You're using other people's pain as a way to avoid sitting with your own unhealed wounds. Because if you're always focused on healing everyone else, you never have to face the places in yourself that still need tending. You never have to confront the scared child inside who learned that love was conditional on emotional service. This is what Jung called the helping profession syndrome, the unconscious belief that your value comes from being needed, from being the emotional container for everyone else's overflow. But here's the truth that might shatter everything you thought you knew about yourself. You're not responsible for other people's emotional regulation. You never were. That weight you've been carrying, that constant pressure to fix and heal and rescue, that's not love. That's a trauma response. And it's killing you slowly, one absorbed emotion at a time. Here's the truth that changes everything. You're not tired of life. You're tired of merging, tired of absorbing everyone else's chaos and calling it love, tired of being the emotional filter for everyone around you, while never being filtered yourself. Because being an empath isn't the wound. The wound is thinking you don't get to have your own emotions. Let me tell you about David. He's 29, a software developer, and he's been in therapy for 3 years trying to understand why every relationship feels like drowning. David attracts people in crisis. They find him at coffee shops, at work events, through mutual friends. They sense something in him, a willingness to hold space for their pain, a capacity to absorb without complaint. And David, hungry for connection, always says yes. But 6 months into any relationship, David starts to disappear. He becomes a mirror for their moods, their anxieties, their dreams. He loses his own opinions, his own preferences, his own emotional center. His last girlfriend, Ashley, would come home from work stressed, and immediately David's nervous system would spike. He'd spend the entire evening trying to regulate her emotions, asking the right questions, offering solutions, absorbing her frustration until it became his own. When Ashley was sad, David became sad. When she was angry, David became angry. When she was excited, David performed excitement, even if he was feeling completely different inside. Ashley never asked him to do this. She would often say, "David, you don't have to fix my mood. I just need you to be present." But David didn't know how to be present without merging. He didn't know how to love without disappearing. His therapist asked him a question that changed everything. "David, when was the last time you felt your own feelings without immediately trying to fix someone else's?" David sat in silence for 5 full minutes. He couldn't remember. He realized he had no idea who he was outside of other people's emotional states. His entire identity had become, "I am whatever you need me to be." That's the moment of rupture Jung wrote about, when the unconscious pattern finally becomes conscious. When you realize that what you've been calling love has actually been self-erasure. David's childhood was different from Emma's, but the wound was the same. His father was an alcoholic with explosive anger. David learned that the only way to stay safe was to become hyper-attuned to his father's emotional state. If he could sense the rage building, maybe he could prevent the explosion. David became the family's emotional barometer. He could tell within minutes whether his father was having a good day or a bad day just by the sound of his footsteps on the stairs. When his father came home calm, David would exhale with relief. When his father came home agitated, David would immediately shift in a hypervigilance mode, scanning for threats, trying to anticipate needs, preparing to absorb whatever rage was coming. This hypervigilance saved him as a child, but as an adult, it was destroying him. Carl Jung believed that individuation, the integration of the shadow and the persona, is the only way back to wholeness. That starts with boundaries. But boundaries aren't just about saying no. They're about saying yes to yourself. When you finally whisper to yourself, "This is not mine. This feeling doesn't belong to me. I don't need to fix what didn't break inside me." That moment is the rupture. That's when the empath stops performing and starts returning. But here's what makes this process so difficult. When you start setting boundaries, people will call you selfish. They'll say you've changed. They'll mourn the version of you that was always available, always absorbing, always fixing. Emma experienced this when she started saying no at work. A colleague who had been venting to her daily for months suddenly became cold and distant. "I thought you cared about me," she said accusingly. "You used to be so supportive." The guilt was overwhelming. Emma's inner child screamed, "See, if you don't take care of everyone, they'll abandon you. You're being selfish. You're a bad person. And part of you will want to go back. Part of you will miss the feeling of being needed, even if it was slowly killing you." This is what Jung called the transcendent function, the ability to hold the tension between opposing forces without collapsing into one or the other. To be compassionate without self-abandoning. To care without merging. The empath's journey isn't about becoming cold or disconnected. It's about learning the difference between empathy and enmeshment, between love and self-sacrifice, between feeling with someone and disappearing into them. Your nervous system needs to remember, other people's emotions are not your emergency. Their healing is not your responsibility. Their pain is not your burden to bear. You can witness without absorbing. You can care without carrying. You can love without losing yourself. This is the revolutionary act that terrifies everyone around you. The moment you stop being their emotional container and start being your own person. But it's also the moment you become truly helpful. Because someone who's lost in a storm can't rescue anyone else. Someone who's drowning can't pull others to safety. Only when you're rooted in your own center can you offer genuine support instead of codependent merger. Jung wrote, "The meeting of two personalities is like the contact of two chemical substances. If there is any reaction, both are transformed. But transformation requires two whole people, not one person disappearing into another." So what now? Start with silence. When you feel overwhelmed, don't ask, "What do they need?" Ask, "What part of me just got activated?" Because often, your triggers are old wounds playing out in real time. Start journaling. Whose emotion is this? What do I get when I carry pain that isn't mine? What happens if I put it down? Shadow work is not about fighting who you are. It's about remembering who you were before you became everyone else's therapist. Let's get practical about this, because awareness without action is just sophisticated self-torture. First, learn to pause. When someone comes to you with their emotional crisis, before you immediately absorb and respond, take 3 conscious breaths. Ask yourself, am I responding from my center or from my wound? The wounded empath says, I have to fix this. Their pain is my responsibility. If I don't help, I'm a bad person. The integrated empath says, I can witness this. I can offer support without absorbing their emotional state. My worth is not determined by how much I can carry. Start practicing what Jung called active imagination, the ability to separate your inner experience from external projections. When you're around someone who's anxious, notice the anxiety without immediately making it yours. Imagine a protective bubble around your energy field. You can still see through it, still connect, still care, but their emotional state doesn't automatically become your internal reality. This isn't about becoming cold or disconnected. It's about becoming sovereign. Remember Emma from earlier? She started setting boundaries at work. Instead of automatically saying yes when colleagues wanted to vent, she began saying, I can see you're going through something difficult. Have you considered talking to a professional about this? At first, people were confused. Some were even offended. They mourned the version of Emma who was always available to absorb their overflow. But something beautiful happened. Emma started sleeping better. Her anxiety decreased. She began to remember what her own emotions felt like, separate from everyone else's projected pain. And the people who truly valued her, not just for her emotional labor, but for who she actually was, those relationships deepened. Emma also started asking herself difficult questions in her journal. What do I get from being needed? Does it make me feel important? Safe? Loved? What would happen if I stopped fixing everyone? Who would I be if I wasn't a rescuer? What parts of myself have I abandoned in service of others? These questions led her back to that 7-year-old girl who learned that love was conditional on emotional service. Emma began to grieve for that child who never got to just be a child, who was forced to become a tiny therapist before she even learned how to tie her shoes. David went through a similar process. He started noticing when he was absorbing other people's energy. In meetings, he would check in with himself. Is this anxiety mine, or am I picking it up from my stress colleague? He learned to visualize roots growing from his feet into the earth whenever he felt himself starting to merge with someone else's emotional state. This simple practice helped him stay grounded in his own experience. David also started a practice that felt revolutionary. He began asking himself what he wanted instead of automatically focusing on what others needed. What do I want for dinner? What movie do I actually want to watch? How do I feel about this situation? These questions felt foreign at first. He'd been so focused on reading and responding to other people's needs that his own preferences had become invisible. You don't have to stop being kind, but you do need to be kind to yourself first. That means saying no. That means not answering every text immediately. That means not holding everyone's pain just to feel valuable. Start asking yourself, what do I need right now? Not what they need. Not what would make everyone else comfortable. What do you need? This question might feel foreign at first. You might not even know how to answer it. That's okay. That's normal. You've been focused outward for so long that turning inward feels like learning a new language. Be patient with this process. Be gentle with the part of you that wants to go back to merging. That part you developed for good reasons. It kept you safe when you were small and powerless. But you're not small anymore. You're not powerless anymore. You get to choose how much emotional labor you take on. You get to choose which energies you allow into your field. Here's a simple practice to start with. Every morning, before you check your phone or interact with anyone else, spend 5 minutes with yourself. Put your hand on your heart and ask, how am I feeling today? What do I need? Don't try to fix or change whatever comes up. Just listen. Just witness. Just be present with your own inner landscape for a few minutes. This practice will feel selfish at first. Your inner critic will say, you don't have time for this. Other people need you. This is indulgent. But learning to be present with yourself is the foundation of healthy boundaries. You can't protect what you don't know you have. Also, start paying attention to your body signals. Empaths often live so much in their heads, processing and analyzing everyone else's emotions, that they lose connection with their physical experience. When you walk into a room, notice, does your chest tighten? Do your shoulders rise? Does your breathing become shallow? These are signs that you're absorbing energy that doesn't belong to you. When you notice these signals, take a moment to breathe and visualize returning any borrowed emotions to their rightful owners. You're not responsible for managing everyone else's emotional state. You're only responsible for your own. Carl Jung said, the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. Not what the world needed. Not who they project onto you. Not the version of you that makes everything better. But you are. You are not here to dissolve into others. You are here to become whole. So let them feel their own pain. Let the storm rage outside. You, stay rooted. You, stay with you. Because only when the empath learns to protect their energy can their light finally become their own. Here's what integration looks like in practice. You can sit with someone in their pain without making it yours. You can offer support without sacrificing your center. You can love without disappearing. You learn to recognize the difference between empathy and emotional codependency, between compassion and self-abandonment, between caring for others and losing yourself in the process. The integrated empath doesn't shut down their sensitivity. They learn to use it consciously. They feel into situations and people, but they don't automatically absorb what they sense. They become like water, flowing around obstacles rather than trying to absorb them. Present but not porous. Available but not depleted. This is what Jung meant by individuation, the process of becoming psychologically whole. It's not about perfection. It's about integration. It's about bringing your shadow into conscious relationship with your persona. Your shadow holds your anger, your needs, your right to boundaries, your permission to prioritize your own well-being. For too long, you've kept these parts of yourself in exile because you were afraid that claiming your own space would make you selfish. But selfishness and self-care are not the same thing. Selfishness takes from others. Self-care ensures you have something to give. Emma, 6 months into her boundary-setting journey, describes it like this. I used to feel like I was drowning in everyone else's emotions. Now I feel like I'm standing on solid ground with my arms open, able to offer genuine support because I'm not disappearing into their pain. David learned something profound. I thought being sensitive meant absorbing everything. Now, I realize true sensitivity is being able to feel what's happening without losing myself in it. When you finally stop using other people's emotions as a way to avoid your own inner work, something miraculous happens. You start to heal, not just emotionally, but physically. The chronic fatigue lifts. The anxiety decreases. Your immune system strengthens. Because your nervous system is no longer constantly processing emotional information that doesn't belong to you. You might lose some relationships in this process. The people who are only connected to the version of you that absorb their overflow might drift away. And that's okay. That's necessary. You'll make space for relationships where you're valued for who you are, not for how much emotional labor you can provide. The people who love you, really love you, will celebrate your boundaries. They'll appreciate the version of you that shows up from wholeness instead of woundedness. Take a moment right now to place your hand on your heart. Feel your own heartbeat. This is your rhythm. This is your center. This is what you come back to when the world gets overwhelming. You don't have to carry everyone else's pain to prove your worth. You don't have to disappear into others to earn love. You don't have to sacrifice your emotional well-being to be a good person. Your sensitivity is a gift, but only when it's bounded. Your empathy is powerful, but only when it flows from wholeness rather than woundedness. The journey back to yourself might feel selfish at first. That's your conditioning talking. That's the voice of a child who learned that merger meant survival. But you're not that child anymore. You're an adult who gets to choose how much of yourself you give and to whom. You're a sovereign being who deserves to feel your own feelings, live your own life, and protect your own energy. Jung believed that the goal of human development is not to become perfect, but to become whole. To integrate all parts of yourself, the light and the shadow, the giver and the receiver, the one who cares and the one who protects. You don't have to choose between being kind and having boundaries. You don't have to choose between being sensitive and being strong. You gotta be all of it. The world doesn't need another person who's disappeared into everyone else's pain. The world needs you, the real you, the integrated you, the version of yourself that's learned to love without losing, to care without carrying, to feel without drowning. That's your gift. That's your offering. That's who you're here to become. Here's a final practice for you. Tonight, before you go to sleep, spend a few minutes writing in your journal. Ask yourself these questions. What emotions did I carry today that weren't mine? What would change if I gave those emotions back to their rightful owners? What does my own emotional signature feel like when it's not mixed with everyone else's? What part of me am I ready to reclaim? Be gentle with whatever comes up. Be patient with the process. Be proud of yourself for beginning this journey back to wholeness. So come home to yourself. The door has always been open. You just forgot where you put the key. Remember, you're not responsible for everyone else's emotional weather. You're only responsible for tending your own inner garden. And when you do that, when you root yourself in your own truth, when you protect your own energy, when you love yourself enough to set boundaries, you become a beacon of genuine healing in this world. Not because you're absorbing everyone's pain, but because you're showing them what it looks like to be whole. If this resonated with you, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. What patterns are you ready to release? What boundaries are you ready to create? Your journey matters, and you don't have to walk it alone. And if you found value in this exploration of Jung's shadow work, consider subscribing for more content that honors both your sensitivity and your sovereignty.